Stop scrolling. This message was meant for you. That ache in your chest, the silence that still echoes from the absence of the one who was supposed to be your first comfort, your warmest yes, your beginning cradle. It wasn't random. That separation from your mother, whether emotional, physical, or spiritual, was not a misstep of fate. It was a divine incision, a holy rupture, a sacred wound carved by the hand of destiny itself. You didn't lose her. You were cut from her because your soul had an assignment that could not be fulfilled under the same roof or within the same emotional system. This isn't random. You've been haunted by the distance, burdened by guilt, spinning questions in the dark. Did I do something wrong? Why doesn't she see me? Why did God let this happen? But what if this was protection disguised as pain? What if the severing was surgical? Comment I receive it if your spirit knows this was for you. And if this resonates, share below how this separation has shaped you because someone else needs your echo. Let's begin. You were born through her body, yes, but not for her shadow. Your life was never meant to orbit her expectations, her wounds, or even her version of love. God used her as a vessel, but not as your home. And though that truth stings, it is holy, because you have mistaken absence for rejection, when it was actually the mark of being chosen. God removed you not because you were too broken, but because you were too sacred to be molded by anything less than heaven's hand. You were different even as a child. Weren't you sensitive in rooms that felt numb, aware of emotional undercurrents no one acknowledged, hungry for a love you could feel but never quite reach? And over time, you stopped expecting it. You trained your nervous system to walk through warmth like a ghost. You taught your smile how to mimic peace while silently drowning. But what if I told you that God saw all of it, that He allowed it not to punish you, but to prepare you, because had she loved you the way you craved, you would have clung to her instead of Him. Had she affirmed you too early, you would have built your confidence on her mirror, not on your divine reflection. So He allowed the wound, the ache, the hollowness, not to break you, but to awaken you. Because the chosen ones rarely come from comfort. They are forged in the fires of misunderstanding, absence, and loneliness. Why? Because they carry something that must be protected even from those who birth them. And when God is guarding a blueprint that can't be tampered with, He will cut you off from anything that might try to redesign it. You didn't just lose a mother, you inherited a mantle. The separation wasn't an ending, it was a beginning, a sacred setup for something that could only grow in silence, in longing, in the tension of, why wasn't I enough for her to stay? But here's the truth, your worth was never meant to be proven by her presence. It was always declared by God's, and He never left. There's a moment no one prepares you for, the moment you realize you've been walking alone far longer than anyone noticed. It doesn't hit all at once. It builds, like wind under a door, like a faucet dripping in a quiet house. You start to wonder why no one checks on you like you check on them, why your strength is praised but your sorrow is ignored. And then one day, you say it out loud. She was never really there for me. Was she? And it cracks something open. But listen to me now, solitude didn't come to punish you. It came to prepare you. What looked like abandonment was actually a consecration. God hid you, set you apart, because some anointings can't be formed in the presence of constant comfort. Some callings require the silence of the cave, not the noise of the crowd. And yes, even the maternal crowd. You didn't know it, but every lonely birthday, every empty milestone, every prayer you whispered into the ceiling with no mother to echo, it was actually a sacred offering. You were learning how to hold yourself, how to hear God's voice in the absence of human ones, how to fall and still rise, even when no one clapped. You were being trained in the shadows, just like Moses, exiled from Egypt and hidden in the wilderness. Just like David, anointed but still stuck with sheep. Just like Jesus, growing in stature and spirit while the world knew him only as Mary's boy. Solitude has always been the forge of the chosen, and it's not that you didn't need her. It's that her presence might have made you need her more than him. That's the tension no one talks about. God will strip you of every support beam that threatens to replace his presence. Even if it means letting the one who birthed you ignore you, even if it means letting the one you love the most never understand you. It wasn't your weakness that drove you into the wilderness. It was your weight. You carry a calling so massive, so spiritually rare, that God had to put you in isolation early because intimacy with him needed to be your first language. Not validation, not emotional rescue, not human approval, just you, the ache, and the whisper of God saying, "Keep going. I'm still here." Yes, you cried in silence, but that silence made your ears sharp for heaven's frequency. Yes, you reached for her and felt nothing, but that void carved out a place where divine identity could echo. You were not being rejected. You were being refined. God did not forget you in the quiet. He was speaking, shaping, stretching. You weren't alone. You were in training. And now, when others crumble because they're unsupported, you stand firm. Because you've already learned how to walk through fire with no hand to hold. You don't just survive. You prophesy from pain. You minister from memory. You lead from the lonely. Because what the enemy called isolation, God called initiation. And darling, you passed the test. It's one thing to lose someone. It's another to lose the illusion of them. You spent years holding on to the hope that maybe one day she'd show up different, softer, safer, seeing you, saying all the things you needed to hear when you were still small, still open, still desperate to be loved like that. But the longer you waited, the more silent she became, or worse, loud in all the wrong ways. And so eventually, God let the illusion die, because he loved you too much to let you build your life around a fantasy. Her absence forced you to stop looking for yourself in her eyes and start looking for yourself in his word. Do you feel that shift, that silent breaking that happens when you realize someone you love may never apologize, that they may never change, or reach back, or even see what they've done? And yet, your life still moves forward, trembling but unshaken? This is emotional refinement. The spiritual fire that burns away every false idol, including the idol of being loved how you imagined. And it hurts. God, it hurts. The kind of hurt that doesn't leave a scar on the skin, but hollows out the inside of your voice. You question your lovability, your enoughness, your humanity. Because how can someone who made you treat you like that disregard you, like that rewrite the story, like you were always the villain, but God saw that too. And in his mercy, he stripped away the false mirrors. Because had you stayed in that reflection, you'd have believed the lie that love is earned through silence, sacrifice, and swallowing yourself, that your softness was a liability, that your tears were manipulation, that your truth was too much. And so, God lets you break, not to leave you shattered, but to show you what wasn't real, to make you question the narrative, to set your heart on a collision course with truth so deep, it would drown every lie she unknowingly or knowingly taught you. You didn't need her to name you. God already had. You didn't need her to validate your story. Heaven already wrote it in gold. And though the ache of not being chosen by your own mother can feel like the cruelest irony, you were always chosen, just not by her. Chosen by the one who knit you in secret, who watched your tears in the dark, who saw you reach for her and receive silence and whispered, "I will be the voice she couldn't be." This is the season where God reintroduces you to yourself. The you that doesn't shrink around her moods, the you that doesn't flinch when she's disappointed, the you that doesn't beg for scraps of affection, because you've been seated at a higher table. And maybe now, for the first time, you can breathe fully, freely, without asking permission. Because when love is stripped, truth is revealed. And the truth is, you were never too much. You were too holy to be understood by someone still healing from their own unloved childhood. You don't need her to become whole. You already are. Some people are born to carry the flame. Others are born from it. You, beloved, were the latter. That fire in your chest, that unexplainable sensitivity, that prophetic ache, that feeling that you were sent here, not just born, that was forged in the place where most people break the mother wound. And that's not a cliche. That's a spiritual reality. Because when the maternal embrace is absent, something sacred gets unlocked. Your voice, not your talking voice, your spiritual voice, the one that moves atmospheres, the one that breaks generational curses, the one that makes demons tremble, not because it's loud, but because it was born from pain that didn't kill you. God looked at your life and said, I need a prophet, not a puppet. And prophets don't come from ease. They come from environments that force them to ask dangerous questions, that make them bleed wisdom, that teach them how to listen, not just speak. That's why he let the distance linger, why he didn't answer every prayer for reconciliation, why he allowed you to walk through seasons where you screamed for her comfort and only heaven answered. Not because God was cold, but because he was carving a well so deep in you that when you finally speak, the water would be holy. You were not being punished. You were being positioned. And yes, it would have been beautiful to have a mother who nurtured your gifts, who said, I see God in you, who made space for your questions without shutting them down, who held your teenage heart when it was splitting open with unspoken dreams. But that's not what you got. You got silence, dismissal, maybe even spiritual warfare disguised as parenting. And yet you still bloomed. That right there is why you're dangerous to the kingdom of darkness, because you became exactly what you needed without ever receiving it. You learned to mother your own heart, to anoint your own forehead, to walk yourself through grief like a midwife of your own resurrection. And now, you're being called out of survival into assignment. The ache was never just about the absence, it was about the awakening. Because prophets aren't just born, they're provoked. And nothing provokes the divine voice like injustice, like neglect, like waiting for someone to fight for you and realizing you were the one God appointed to fight for others. That's why you feel everything so deeply. Why you can sit in a room and sense what no one is saying. Why you have dreams that shake your body and wake up crying. Why you can write or sing or create things that feel bigger than you. Because it is bigger than you. It's God's voice echoing through your fracture. He used the missing mother to make a messenger. He used the unanswered questions to shape a holy language no human could teach you. You don't just carry a testimony, you carry an assignment. So stop waiting for her to acknowledge it. She doesn't have the eyes to see it. You've been validated by the only voice that matters. And now, it's time to use yours. There comes a moment when you must stop mourning what couldn't be and start honoring what had to be. It's hard. I know. Letting go of the version of her you imagined. The one who would have clapped for your weirdness, cheered your breakthroughs, listened when your voice trembled with truth. But there's a deeper truth rising now, one that will set you free if you let it. You weren't meant to inherit her limitations. You were born to interrupt them. And that means the separation wasn't just emotional, it was spiritual. God couldn't let you build your life around a blueprint that was never designed for your destiny. Her mindset, her patterns, her version of love, those things may have been good enough for the generation before you, but they weren't equipped to carry the weight you were born to bear. So heaven broke the cycle by breaking the connection. And that fracture, it felt cruel, it felt unfair, but it was actually sacred. Because had you stayed too close, you would have started mirroring her survival mechanisms instead of mastering your own freedom. You would have learned to stay small, to comply, to adapt, to inherit wounds like heirlooms, calling it loyalty. But you were never born to blend in. You were born to break open the generational silence, to question what others accepted, to feel what others ignored, to say what others buried. And for that to happen, you had to be set apart. Not just emotionally, but energetically. God placed a fire inside you that couldn't coexist with the fears she never confronted. Your calling would have made her uncomfortable. Your voice would have threatened her false peace. Your purpose would have shattered the fragile agreements that kept the family stuck. So instead of giving you her full presence, he gave you distance, not as rejection, as preservation. Because sometimes love looks like silence. Sometimes honor means stepping back. Sometimes the greatest gift a parent can give without even knowing it is the space for you to evolve beyond them. Let's be honest, you felt guilty for outgrowing her emotional vocabulary. You felt ashamed for wanting more than what she called enough. But it wasn't pride. It was purpose pulling you higher. And that doesn't make her bad. It makes you different. Different enough to grieve her pain and choose your healing. Different enough to see her as human and still walk away from the cycle. Different enough to love her from afar while obeying the God who called you to go further. You were never meant to stay in the house that raised you. You were meant to become the temple that redefines what family even looks like. And yes, you'll be misunderstood for it. Yes, people will say you're ungrateful, too sensitive, too distant, too holy. But they didn't see what you saw. They didn't feel what you felt at midnight, curled up with questions and no mother to soothe the storm. They didn't hear God whisper, "Come out from among them and be separate." You did. So let the guilt burn away now. Let the need to fit into old rooms dissolve. Let the echo of her disappointment lose its grip. You didn't betray her. You obeyed God. And obedience will always cost more when it runs against the bloodline. You keep wondering why you were never enough for her to stay. Why she couldn't love you the way your spirit longed for. Why your milestones were met with silence. Your softness seen as weakness. Your brilliance mistaken for rebellion. But here's a sacred truth that no one told you. Growing up, heaven had to withhold what earth would have spoiled. God saw that if she had loved you too loudly, too consistently, too affirmingly, you might have mistaken her love for your source. You might have built your confidence on her approval. You might have confused validation with identity. And one day when she inevitably shifted or fell or failed, your entire sense of self would have collapsed with her. So God stepped in. He didn't let her become your source because he was already claiming that place. He watched you cry out for her affection. And though it broke his heart to see your little hands grasping air, he knew that if he gave you what you wanted, it would keep you from what you were born for. Because some souls are too rare to be confirmed by common love. Some destinies are too weighty to be affirmed by broken people. And some callings must remain hidden until the world forgets to look for them in the places they expect. So no, you weren't forgotten. You were guarded. God didn't let your glory be attached to someone who couldn't handle the fullness of it. Not because she was wicked, but because she wasn't assigned to water the garden God was growing in you. And you know what happens when the wrong gardener tends a sacred seed. It gets clipped too early, caged too soon, picked before it can root. So instead of comfort, God gave you wilderness. Instead of nurture, he gave you clarity. Instead of applause, he gave you an ache that sharpened your hearing until you could distinguish his whisper in a crowd of noise. Yes, you were shaped in shadows. Yes, you were kissed by absence instead of warmth. But somehow, that absence gave you eyes to see what others miss. It gave you discernment, power, presence. And now, you walk into rooms carrying a gravity that can't be taught, a stillness that comes from surviving storms no one else saw, a weight that says, "I've been with God, and I didn't come back empty." You have a love now that's deeper than approval. It's covenantal. It's the love of the one who made you on purpose, for a purpose, and refused to let anyone's opinion interfere with his original design. So stop punishing yourself for not receiving what was never yours to begin with. Stop chasing healing through conversations that won't happen. Stop rehearsing speeches she may never be ready to hear. You don't need her to say sorry to start healing. You don't need her to approve your calling to start walking in it. You don't need her to fill the void. God already did. You just haven't paused long enough to realize you're already full. Forgiveness is a holy word, but it's been twisted. You were told it means to go back, to pretend it didn't happen, to sit at the same table that once broke you, smiling through the splinters in your heart. But let me say this gently, prophetically, and with authority: forgiveness is not return, it is release. You don't have to go back to what cracked your spirit just to prove you're healed. You don't have to answer her calls if they still carry poison. You don't have to subject yourself to emotional disfigurement just to wear the badge of good child. That's not forgiveness. That's bondage. Forgiveness doesn't mean reunion. It means redemption, starting with your own soul. And this is where it gets uncomfortable, because you still want her to change, to show up, to say, "I'm sorry I didn't protect you. I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I'm sorry I didn't love you better." You want that moment, the healing movie scene. But let me tell you something sacred. You are not waiting on her. You are waiting on you to finally accept that you may never get the apology, but you still get the healing. You don't need closure from her. God is your closure. And the truth is, your bitterness may have been protecting you for a while. Bitterness can feel like armor when forgiveness feels like exposure. But bitterness will not carry you into your next season. It's heavy, it's rusted, and it's beginning to choke the very joy God is trying to birth through you. So here's the sacred exchange God is offering: honor her without returning to her dysfunction. Pray for her without needing to be in her presence. See her humanity without letting her wound your divinity. This is next level spiritual maturity. To look at the one who didn't nurture you and say, "I still bless you, but I choose peace over proximity." It's holy to release without returning. It's strength to remember without reliving. It's divine wisdom to let go while still carrying love, but love that doesn't cost your sanity. And in that space, you heal. You heal because you're no longer waiting for her to water seeds she never planted. You heal because you stop expecting fruit from barren soil. You heal because you realize you become the mother you always needed: protective, nurturing, wise, soft, and strong, all in one. God didn't leave the mother space in your life empty. He filled it with himself, with women of wisdom who came like angels in unlikely places, with mentors, prayers, scriptures, and sudden downloads of clarity that didn't make sense for your age. That wasn't random. That was divine mothering, because even when she wasn't present, God still parented you. So now don't let unforgiveness build a second prison in a life you already had to crawl your way out of. You are free to bless her, to honor the vessel that brought you here, and still, lovingly and firmly, never go back to the place where your soul was silenced. That's not disobedience. That's divine discernment. There's a quiet theme running through Scripture that many miss, a pattern so tender and terrifying, it could only be authored by God himself. The pattern: separation before elevation, division before destiny, holy disconnection before divine revelation. You're not the only one who was pulled away from blood. You're not the first chosen one who had to walk without the ones who should have walked beside you. This has always been the way of heaven. Joseph was betrayed by his brothers, sold, silenced, shoved into a system that forgot his name so that God could raise him up in a land that never knew his origin, but would soon need his anointing. Moses was adopted away from his Hebrew roots, raised in the house of Pharaoh, separated from his family, so he could one day confront the empire that once fed him. Esther was orphaned, snatched from the arms of familiarity, placed in a palace where no one spoke her soul's language, so that when the moment came, she would already know how to speak with boldness in places where she didn't belong. Jesus himself misunderstood by his own mother, questioned by his family, accused of madness by the ones who raised him. "Who is my mother? Who are my brothers?" He said, "Those who do the will of my Father." Even he had to draw a line between bloodline and assignment. So tell me, why do you think your story is any different? Why do you think your divine calling would come with maternal comfort when every prophet before you was cut away from something familiar? You are not cursed. You are not defective. You are divinely patterned after the ones heaven trusted with holy fire. And this fire requires separation, not because family is evil, but because sometimes family is blind. They see who you are not, who you're becoming. They remember the version of you they could control, not the glory now pouring from your scars. And so, in his mercy, God lets the divide happen to preserve your purity, to protect your assignment, to prevent you from anchoring in places you were always meant to outgrow. You weren't meant to stay and convince them. You were meant to go and become. And no, they won't understand. They'll say you're dramatic, cold, dishonoring. But what they call rebellion, God calls release. What they call distance, God calls divine redirection. This isn't about cutting people off. This is about cutting the cord between your destiny and their expectations. And if Jesus had to do it, so will you. You were born into the bloodline, yes, but you were reborn into the spirit line. And that line often walks alone, upstream, against what's comfortable. It's okay to mourn it, to cry over what never was, to ache for the mother who didn't know how to mother the messenger inside you. But after the tears, you must rise, because you are part of the same story as Joseph, Moses, Esther, Jesus, divinely separated, sacredly misunderstood, chosen by the fracture, and called by God's own mouth. You've spent too long trying to explain yourself to people who were never meant to understand you, especially her. You've begged her to see you, to see past what you did, what you said, what you became. You've watered yourself down to fit her comfort. You've translated your pain into palatable sentences. You've said, maybe if I say it softer, maybe if I show her how much I love her, maybe then she'll get it. But here's the truth. She can't understand a calling she was never assigned to carry. And that's not an insult. It's a revelation. Some things are hidden on purpose. Some anointings are invisible until their appointed time. And when people can't see you, it's not always because you're invisible, it's because you're veiled. God put a spiritual veil over your life, not to punish you, but to protect you. Because had everyone seen you too early, including her, they might have tried to shape you into something easier to manage. Something smaller, more familiar, less threatening to their worldview. But you weren't sent here to be safe. You were sent here to be a sign. And signs are never understood by the ones speeding past. They're only noticed by the ones who slow down and look with spiritual eyes. She may not have those eyes yet, and that's okay, because your proof isn't in her acceptance. Your proof is in your fruit. Look at what's grown in you since the breaking. Look at how tender you've remained, even when no one nurtured you. Look at how you pray, how you discern, how you love, how you rise again and again with a fire that can't be extinguished. That's the evidence of your calling. And if they couldn't see it when it was forming, they won't comprehend it now that it's blooming. But here's the part that stings. You have to stop waiting for them to catch up. Your destiny doesn't require their revelation. Your elevation doesn't require their agreement. Your healing doesn't require their apology. You're allowed to move forward without their understanding. You're allowed to grieve what wasn't while still growing into what is. You're allowed to say, I love her, but I cannot make myself small for her to feel big. Because the truth is, she was never supposed to get it. If she had, she might have tried to keep you close in a way that would have compromised your clarity. She might have tried to love you into a version of yourself that felt safe but not sacred. So God blocked the understanding. Let that sink in. He blocked it. And now, When you walk into rooms and people misunderstand your silence as arrogance, your boundaries as betrayal, your distance as dishonor, you'll remember this truth. You weren't made to be understood. You were made to be obeyed. Not by others, by you, by the version of you that hears God clearly and walks forward even when your heart still aches, by the version that no longer waits for permission to exist in fullness. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are simply unfolding in front of people who were never given the language to interpret your bloom. And that's proof you were called. Some souls are born marked, branded by heaven long before the world could stain them. And from the very beginning, they carry a weight that others can't name. A strange grief, a strange glow, a strange resistance that makes them feel like outsiders in their own family. That was you. You weren't just different, you were divinely different. And because of that, your life had to break in places that made no sense to those watching. The separation from your mother. It was one of the deepest of those breaks. But not because God was cruel, because God was intentional. You were always the exception, never the mistake. From your first breath, the spiritual atmosphere around you reacted. The enemy saw the blueprint on your back and said, if I can sever them from their source of nurturing, I can keep them from their calling. But what Satan meant to shatter you, God used to shape you. Your pain didn't disqualify your purpose, it qualified it. It was in the nights you cried for a mother who never came. That heaven whispered the secrets of your strength. It was in the years you tried to earn what should have been given freely, that God trained your spirit in the discipline of not chasing crumbs, but claiming crowns. And now, here you are, still standing, still breathing, still becoming. You may not see it fully yet, but the very things that were used to shame you are becoming your sacred tools. That wound in your chest, it's an altar now. That silence you grew up with, it made you a fierce listener. That ache for nurture, it birthed a supernatural tenderness in you that heals everyone you meet. You are not behind. You are not lost. You are not cursed. You are being revealed. The same God who allowed the breaking is now ushering in your building. The same Spirit who held you in the absence is now pushing you into abundance. And this is where the shift happens, not because you've suddenly fixed everything with her, but because you've finally remembered who you are. Not her disappointment, not her projection, not her silence. You are God's echo in the earth, a vessel of generational transformation, a holy interruption in a bloodline that was used to patterns, but wasn't prepared for power. And maybe, just maybe, the pain was proof that your assignment couldn't afford to be misdiagnosed, that you were sent to become what she never was, to raise what she couldn't, to heal what she buried. You were sent to birth freedom through your own scars. So now rise. Rise not as a victim of maternal absence, but as a product of divine presence. Walk like someone who knows they were chosen on purpose and separated with purpose. And when the ache returns, and it will remember you are not unlovable, you were hidden, you are not too much. You were always meant to carry more. You are not the orphan. You are the oracle. And no one, not even the one who raised you, can cancel the anointing that was placed in you before you had a name. Now go walk in it. Breathe. Let your shoulders drop. Let your spirit rest. You've been carrying so many questions, so much grief wrapped in silence. You've been pretending you're okay when your heart still aches in the shape of a mother's love. But tonight, heaven interrupts the ache with something greater. Clarity. It wasn't your fault. It wasn't her capacity. It was his strategy. You were never forgotten, never overlooked, never unloved. You were simply set apart in a way the world didn't recognize. But now you see it. The separation was sacred. The silence was soil. The absence was alignment. You have not been buried. You've been planted. And what's rising in you now is the kind of strength that doesn't demand explanation. It just walks in the room and shifts the atmosphere. What's growing in you now is a garden of glory, where trauma once tried to take root. So here's your permission. Stop chasing closure from broken places. Stop waiting for someone else to call you whole. Stop